Dawn of DC is the newest era of DC Comics. While not a major reboot or anything, it's basically a rebrand, a way to bring in new readers in for kind of a jumping point, but also a great way to say we started a new outlook on most titles for DC Comics. With New 52 being a major reboot and then following years later with Rebirth, which was another reboot, this Dawn of DC is less of a reboot and more of a hopeful outlook on DC Comics for 2023 onward. And before we talk about Dawn of DC, I kind of want to go back in time and talk about other eras of DC. And New 52 was a messy era. If you go back and read interviews, it's almost amazing that it even worked as half as good as it did. We got a ton of new comics, but we also got a lot of cancellations within just a few issues, and very few titles in the New 52 actually lasted to 52 issues as promised. Also, many of the longtime readers were not pleased with the New 52 era, as it erased a lot of continuity that people had grown to love. However, it was a jumping on point for a ton of new readers, and that is usually the mission when it comes to comics: get new readers. Whereas Rebirth was a different beast entirely, a way to rebrand and reboot, but also bring back the old. It was ambitious. It was a love letter to longtime readers to come back into the fold, that your favorites would return, that Wally West was back, and a lot more of a hopeful outlook was on the horizon, and not so dour and edgy like the New 52 mostly was. And while it was exciting for DC Comics during the Rebirth era, there was some confusion. People began questioning what was canon and what wasn't. Characters made for the New 52 to replace old characters pre-New 52 still stuck around during the Rebirth. So we now had two different Wallies. We had one Superman, but had the memories of the New 52 eventually, and things just got shaky at best, and the attempt to bring in the old kind of just felt hazy and half-assed, if I was being honest. But that's not to say Rebirth didn't do a lot of good. Rebirth continued its trend of success at the start. Clark Kent was back, and he was a beacon of hope, and this time with a wife and kid. Green Arrow and Black Canary's love relationship started to form again, which is a big staple of their characters. And slowly we got Wally West back into the fold in the DC universe. And a lot of great things were on the horizon, but of course things like Doomsday Clock and getting delayed so much just affected the overworld, and everything started getting, well, messy again. So the beginning of Rebirth was really from 2016 to 2018, but in 2018 we got a new era, New Justice. This was high concept era in my opinion, especially for the Justice League itself. Superman got a new writer in Mike O'Brien Bendis that altered the family dynamic dramatically and changed things forever. Batman might be getting married, a lot of new creative teams on a bunch of new titles, but also this is where fatigue in the Rebirth era started to set in. Things began to get sour with stuff like Heroes in Crisis, killing off favorites again, especially legacy characters. That really pissed people off, not knowing to do with the Teen Titans or even the Titans, and Green Lanterns were just disappearing. So while the New Justice era was kind of cool in terms of being more of an epic approach, it didn't add much. So things began to shift, and we were about to go into the 5G era. And this era really never fully happened. Basically, it was a future for DC characters, bypassing years and years to kind of create a new landscape for heroes with familiar faces. 5G eventually became what we know now as Future State, in which we had, well, the future shown to us by many different characters, sometimes offspring, sometimes very young characters in the future, or sometimes characters we know much older. And it was a pretty interesting idea, at least it was something fresh, but with the firing of Dan Didio, the 5G that replaced all the lines became basically a test, and mostly all these titles eventually became miniseries for Future State and didn't really amount to much. It was so short-lived, it would be really hard to consider an era of sorts because we really went into the Infinite Frontier pretty quickly after, and that was the next era that is the most recent until Dawn of DC in 2023. So Infinite Frontier is kind of the middle bridge between New Justice and Dawn of DC, and it is a feeling of trying but not fully committing. And Infinite Frontier promised fan favorites to return to course correct what was wrong prior to again add a lot of new creative teams to comics. This is the era most interesting to me in a way because it felt, maybe since Rebirth, a new era without someone like Dan Didio calling all the crazy shots, and more of an era to bring back DC to again a more hopeful outlook. See, it wanted to balance the old with the new. John became a more prominent character in DC landscape, which made sense as a Superman's son. And then we were tying in old characters from like Flashpoint and Infinite Frontier, where these storylines had characters out of different multiverses trying to fix things that people were complaining about, bringing characters like Roy back into the fold in an acceptable way, letting talents like Tom King write more miniseries and not always so dark and brooding, help bring one of the best Supergirl series to date. Philip Kennedy Johnson giving Superman a gladiator-like arc that helped bring the Man of Steel to new heights. Things were beginning to finally turn for the better, in my opinion. Saying that, it wasn't all successful though. While John was an interesting character, his series itself lacked the oomph that I've come to expect from someone like Tom Taylor. Also, Tom Taylor's Nightwing finally became a flagship title again, but also at the same time, I always feel like it's lacking that 1-2 punch that it deserves. And Batman was solid, but he almost felt like entirely away from the rest of the DC universe at this point. So things weren't perfect. They never can be with so many different creative ideas. But if I'm gonna pick one thing that I find the biggest fault of this era, was the mass push of Batman. If it wasn't a Batman title, it had Batman in it. It had a Bat Family character in it. It starred Batman in some way or form. Batman was everywhere. Mass produced like Wolverine in the mid-2000s, being on 17 teams at once. Batman is a character I like. I like the Bat Family. I also like to see other characters get to shine, especially ones who haven't had a single ongoing series in years. Now, Dawn of DC promised that, and so far, we're in about the first 5 months or so. Dawn of DC is slowly becoming one of my favorite eras so far. So I'm a big reader of multiple genres in comics, and superhero comics are a great genre for me. But sometimes the over-reliance of a singular character makes me not interested. Dawn of DC promised to not only give a fresh start to a lot of heroes, but also bring back the hope that we want from characters like Superman. If any title needs a family, it is Superman, but also Action Comics and Superman promise to deliver that. On top of that, we are bringing back another character who has a great family, and his name is Green Arrow. It was so popular the first issue in selling that it had turned from a miniseries into an ongoing series within the first week of its release. Instead of John or Connor having to be relegated to just Action Comics or Superman comics, they both got their own series, keeping up with the Superman family, getting justice, and honestly, both of these series have been a ton of fun so far. John getting to excel again thanks to being in a miniseries by Tom Taylor and bringing more of a spark he had when he was writing Injustice. And the current Connor Kent series, the Superboy mini, feels like an action-packed space adventure anime, and in the best possible way. We also have Hal Jordan returning to a new series, and it's the first time I've been interested in a Green Lantern series since Far Sector. With only one issue out so far at the time of this recording, it worked really well as a jumping on point if you never ever read Green Lantern in your life. But if you are an old-time fan for Green Lantern like me, it actually felt right at home again. The backup issue with John Stewart was also pretty solid. It's always nice to have two great or good series in one comic. But if that's not enough, we get a lot of focus on new heroes in series. First off, Doom Patrol returns with new members. The Vigil, which is a brand new kind of superhero heist team by Ram V, promises to add diversity that we were promised years ago, along with City Boy and Spirit World, which are both really interesting new characters that we haven't seen before or just introduced quickly, like in the Wildstorm 30th anniversary. And even the upcoming Night Terror event sounds like a cool way to dive deep into the fears of heroes and find out their worst fears in a fun summer event type of way. So what I'm getting at is Dawn of DC seems like it's wanting to balance the new and fresh ideas with new creative teams, but this time actually producing multiple different style titles. It's not since the beginning of Rebirth have I felt kind of this exciting about new series, but also bringing back the classic heroes in a new light. I don't feel like they're trying hard to shake things up like New Justice era from 2018, but they're not pumping out the same books with the same characters, also known as Batman Mania, like Infinite Frontier era. No, this feels like wanting to balance everything, bringing a hopeful outlook to the universe while also giving us a new and refreshing feel to a lot of these titles. So will Dawn of DC be a great era? That's the question, and my honest opinion is I hope so. We're still early on, but with the first 5 months now, if that's any indication from Action Comics to Superman to Green Arrow to City Boy to the Superboy titles, we are in for a very solid era. A better start than the last two in my opinion, and maybe even can take Rebirth over if they continue to put out this strong type of work. Now, what would your opinion be on the best era that DC has produced? One of my favorites is probably the Identity Crisis all the way to Infinite Crisis, and even a little past that. That was just the most amazing thing for me. It just captivated me how awesome everything was tying in together, and I'm hoping that we get that with Dawn of DC, but I don't need it to be quite as dark as that. But I would love to hear your opinion. What is the era that really just sparked your interest for DC Comics? Is Dawn of DC something that you're interested in? Put that below. I would love to hear about it. And everybody else, go out, grab some comics, and have a wonderful day.